Oh, hello.
Whoa. Doesn't matter how prepared I am. I'm always startled to see your face show up on my screen.
Oh, well, thanks.
Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah, you survived the pork conference this week.
I did. I think as you mentioned, I went to the National Pork Industry Conference. I think I had the most Midwestern week that you could possibly possibly have this week. Yeah, I went up to the Wisconsin Dells for the national. Yeah, that's Americana for the National Pork Industry Conference. They wanted a presentation about ransomware, of all things, for pork producers, and
very, very relevant for them as of recent.
Yeah, they had this attack against JBS, who's a big meat producer. I had no idea what an impact that had on that
and their supply chain. I bet it was crazy.
Yeah, some pretty crazy stories. Just in really deep impact in an industry that hasn't seen anything. For us cyber types, we're numb to the ransomware attacks, but pretty new stuff for their industry. So, and then I actually not then. Before that, I started my weekend with. I actually have a video I'm gonna show off. I went to a Jimmy Buffett concert of all things.
Just you're really showing your age and Midwestern heritage.
And this dude, God bless him, this dude is old, man. He's in his, I think he's 74, Jimmy Buffett, and still.
That's really here's the one compliment I'll give you. That's a really good video quality, Brian. That's the best compliment I can come up with.
Yeah, and look at how big that crowd was. I think it's officially we're post-COVID.
They seem very, very representative of your demographic.
You don't want to dance too much; it hurt your hip.
That bursitis was really active.
Yeah. I defy you to how my week could have been any more Midwestern than
I have one.
Okay.
And I'm gonna have a very Midwestern weekend this week. I'm going to the county fair.
Oh.
And I'm watching the National Professional Tractor Pulls Association on Friday night. Tell me that's not Midwestern.
Okay, if I pulled in one of those this weekend, it would be hard to
the top. Fabric of the universe would
fabric of the universe. Yeah. I mean, if not like some dirt track car race maybe.
Oh, I love those, man. Yeah. I grew up on a farm and out in the middle of nowhere, and I just still part hillbilly. What can I say?
Yeah. Okay. Well,
let's do this thing. What are we talking about today?
Hard to top any of that. I'm playing my video, whether you like it or not. Here we go.
Oh,
every time.
Gets me every time.
Yeah. So, also in my week, not quite so Midwestern, but I did a training session with an NDR vendor. I guess we'll talk a little bit about what NDR is, and kind of an interesting approach that they had to their training. I should say up front, I'm not getting paid or getting any money from this particular vendor. And I think we maybe talk about that space in general. I think for doing the training, I take that back. I think they're sending me a T-shirt because I participate. I went and did.
I think what you're going to get after this is a thank you, is a bunch of phone calls from the vendor.
Could be, but they did a good job. Pretty interesting. So, what do you think? What do you know about NDR, Aaron? You're a cyber type.
I know that NDR is hard. That as I dig into it in like traditional methodologies, and I have some really stupid questions for you today because I actually didn't get to see the demo of this stuff. So for me, NDR is kind of hard because, especially working in high capacity networks, like if you want to do NDR in your data center, like, okay, fine. If you want to do it in your enterprise network, remote access, cloud, like tie all that kind of stuff together, or you got branch offices, becomes a big problem moving all that traffic around or deploying probes with enough performance out there. And so I think my experience is people like, oh, that's cool, let's do all this stuff. And they're like, that's hard, let's not do it anymore. That's basically, if I could sum up NDR, that's been my experience. But I'm curious how this company addresses some of those challenges. So you can limit my stupid questions, but I'm really curious about it today.
Okay, cool. Well, let me bring up a screen. Okay. So all apologies or credit, I guess, to Gartner. I think this is one of their graphics with copyright preserved. But Gartner talks about a space, the SOC visibility triad, and so that term NDR, or network detection and response, comes out of the SOC visibility triad. So first of all, I would say, maybe anticipating one of the questions I've seen people have is, do I have to have a SOC to have the SOC visibility triad, or is the SOC visibility triad only for people who have a SOC? I definitely will say, most people, I think the concept of SOC visibility triad came around because, people have been thinking about maybe older triads of security products, which is, if I go back 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, I'd have, my security program in terms of software or, hardware solutions boiled down to, well, I've got an antivirus. And so that's, malicious code. And I've got a firewall to control activity between the outside world and typically my inside network. And maybe on that firewall or next to that firewall, I've got an intrusion detection box. And that was kind of, the extent of, what we paid attention to. And then as threats have matured and there are a lot of, other solutions that come into the mix, the SOC visibility triad has emerged. So, people defending the network have, at least according to Gartner, these things, I will say, it gets even more complex, like everything, when we've got a network inside of our company, plus cloud environments, plus remote access, and over the last year, people working from home. But in terms of monitoring my formal network,
lots of network boundaries and domains.
Yeah.
And now networks inside of networks inside of networks.
Networks on top of networks.
It's turtles all the way down. Us networking jerks are making it, infinitely recursive.
Yeah, all of that stuff. But if we could go back to living, or if we could simplify or go back to living in a slightly simpler world, this triad, I've got a SIM, or I've got, they're lumping user and entity behavior analytics into that. I'm pulling logs together from various places and reviewing logs, hopefully. At the top of the triad, I've got endpoint detection and response, which goes beyond traditional anti-malware or antivirus that I'm also paying attention to
It's like
behavior,
host telemetry.
host telemetry and behaviors that are going on those endpoints, and the response, the R in EDR, also in NDR, the response of either I have manual capabilities to do something about those signals, or even I'm automating some playbooks and some responses to when bad things happen. And then I think, in my experience, finally, from what I've seen, a lot of people, might be doing a SIM, and certainly with all the ransomware going on, a lot of people doing EDR, or there's a whole other alphabet.
Yeah, with some real mixed results lately.
Right. Yeah.
I feel like we could put a question mark after detection and response on many of it. It's less of a statement and more of a question these days, it would seem.
Yeah.
And plug for next week, we're going to be going over Google Chronicle for a SIM. So you'll want to come back for that one.
Yeah, should be interesting.
Okay.
Well,
I
and even
hate to
NDR,
cut you off, but triads are boring. Can you take us to the real thing?
Right. Yeah. So NDR, just the concept here, monitoring the network communications for things I may have missed in the other two places, things that there may not be a log for it, and I may not have caught it through my host telemetry. And predominantly command and control network activity, because that's a big component of what's going on, as well as catching lateral movement that movement between bad guys moving between assets on my network that I may not have seen before. And final, somewhat boring slide, ton of products in this space, and goal today wasn't to focus on any one product, but here are some and that are specifically NDR products.
I only buy IBM products.
I know that about you. Running on mainframes.
My Z series has had 0 malware events.
Well, just wait. The day will come, I'm sure. And we've talked about some open source before. The primary, I guess you could call it NDR in this space, Zeek, formerly called Bro, until they decided that was not a good name for a product. And pointing out in IDS, IPS, not really NDR. So you had questions you want to talk about before I just talk about
you can kind of go into it. My stupid questions are around traffic movement. So we have where are they getting the traffic for analysis? Are these like span ports? Are we backhauling a bunch of it, deploying agents? Are we doing net flow analysis? Talk to me about where they're getting this data.
Yeah. So it's all of, many of the above. And so span or tap with physical or virtual appliances is the way, the bulk of this is still working.
Okay.
Yeah. And
I just wondered if they came up with something magical to solve that problem. So we still have the physics of networking that we have to accommodate to move all that traffic.
Correct. And that's certainly, if we go back to the challenges of this portion of NDR, of it still requires, to analyze something, I have to be able to see it. And so
we're relying on unencrypted traffic in span ports dumped to appliances somewhere.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
And thankfully, you and I have some opinions on this, but for sure,
I don't have opinions.
Yeah. But if we were encrypting our traffic, if we ever got serious about encrypting all of our traffic, all of this would get even harder and probably push us back into the more of the two portions of the triad with host telemetry.
And we should talk about this at some point, but I've actually been working on some technology that's a little bit newer even than Vectra, about gathering network telemetry at the host level. So doing it pre-encryption by the underlay network. So we could talk about that at some time. I'm starting to become fond of that model. Anywho.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I've not found many organizations that are there yet, but it's at least worth thinking about of, what's your plan inside of your network among the dozens and dozens of other things that we have to think about inside of our security programs. What's our plan to encrypt all east-west or your traffic, inside of networks. And it seems most people are still not encrypting the vast majority.
I think their plan is no.
Yeah. Yep. So this, one of those particular NDR vendors, and one I'm certainly, I'm fond of. There are a number of good NDR products out there, and two terrible ones that I won't mention. but
you can DM us to get the list.
Yeah,
of
exactly.
Products.
I like Vectra. That they have an interesting approach. They're Vectra.AI. So like many organizations, they're throwing artificial intelligence.
Okay, so that's my other BS meter stupid question thing. And then I have a smart question for you. My first question is, what is the AI part of? Like, what artificial intelligence is in this?
And that I'm not the expert to speak to, but I think this is AI being lumped in with machine learning. I think there's some machine learning of what's good traffic and what's unusual traffic that I think is part of the model. What's the statistically matches patterns of bad?
Color me skeptical on this.
Okay, fair enough. So, like I said, interesting approach, and I'm going to give them, kudos, on the marketing and training. So did this is a session that Vectra is offering and offered to a number of folks that are, customers of our employer, but also, I think they have general sessions that you can sign up for. And so the premise of the training was, here's 3 hours of following capture the flag set of activities, and I have the challenges here. I was a good boy scout. You
got them all done.
Green check boxes, and I got them all done. But
I really like that about this company, though, that they kind of have like that dual value.
Correct.
They're not just marketing the product, because I like when you and I were talking, maybe not you have all the skills, but for folks that are maybe a little bit more junior or not exposed to red team activities, like it was a great educational event.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if you don't ever buy the product.
Yeah, and so leading up to the activity, there are some pre-activities to complete. Like you need to get some. We've talked about overlay networks before. We had to use zero tier, one of the overlay network technologies to get into a private network inside of a cloud. They had a lab set up, and we had a machine with Kali Linux installed to do some of the red team activities. And then we had each of us had our own personalized victim machine that we had just some basic, not privileged user access to. And stepping through a set of activities to escalate that access, follow, sort of paint by numbers. But here's how you as an attacker would escalate access, move through the network, do reconnaissance, find administrative credentials, to find files.
Oh, run Metasploit. I see that as one. That must have been fun.
Yeah. And so, all this of local recon, setting up the box that we had gotten some access to be tied into Metasploit, run some commands, run some utilities out of Metasploit, scan the network, find domain controllers, find file servers and application servers on this, of course, lab network, escalate all that, find the secret, treasure trove of files, and then
run your SQL injection, find the server. Yeah.
and
I like that.
exfiltrate
Pretty
all
cool.
that stuff.
I like the way they have it laid out like this too.
Yeah, correct. And then so just to show one kind of example, interact with victim, step 16. So, well, that's not very interesting.
But I think what that shows is like they lay out the steps, like run these commands, and
yeah, correct.
Yeah, a lot of people need that.
And so there was some copy and paste that was certainly helpful for me. And in 3 hours, I could have not done, 30 steps of, hey, go do this with Kelly, with Metasploit. It was helpful to have that. But even in a couple of places, it was a real lab activity. And so there were a couple of places where, I had missed a command along the way and struggled, but, I had a little bit of knowledge that like, oh, well, I know how to map a network drive, from this host to this host.
Imagine that they enumerate SMB protocols as one of their first steps here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's still running.
We worked through all that. There was a scoreboard along the way as we, who's completed which set of activities. So, and then, where the marketing approach came in, and, again, I kind of appreciated their approach to it, was pretty creative. So after 3 hours of lab activity, we just followed up and they walked us through, this installed in that lab environment, the Vectra.AI tool for network detection and response. And, for this particular host, this victim, that was also, participating in that network, and then became a launching pad as the victim for some other attacks and lateral movement, that really tracked, here are some indicators of compromise. Here are specific activities that we saw, from or to that particular host. And so, SMB brute force attack, remote procedure call reconnaissance, remote desktop protocol reconnaissance, to and from this machine, scanning, like you said, you saw that step where I scan for SMB accounts, and then that shows up as part of this. And you can.
So here's a question for you. So I like this because this would pick up a lot of my shenanigans I do in people's networks.
Yeah.
How does it like filter those to the top? Because so far, I do these network attack surface scans and mapping for people all the time. And, out of hundreds of scans, rarely have any SOC or SIM tool like boil up the activities. Now, if we go hunt through the logs, we can find them, but it almost never makes its way to the top where people are like, timeout, Shavers enumerating your environment. Let's do something about it. How do they convert from that detailed data quickly into somebody should do something? Yeah.
And so in their world, and this is a feature of NDR that in a larger, more mature organization, which is a big caveat, that there would be data feeds out to your SIM tool, which, for a, folks with a SOC, a security operations center, the SIM is usually the primary pane. Your single pane of glass that you're paying attention to, and that's where the alerts. But even just inside of the dashboard of their tool, where as we started the day doing our various activities, and the people running in their own different segmented parts of this lab network, that there were 17 of us doing these activities, against victim machines, and those 17 hosts that we were working against, started our day with 0 critical alerts. And so these 17 through the course of the day, as we did the different activities that you saw on that other dashboard, popped up to the top. So kind of, very much an activity on rails, but I'm pretty confident, I saw this dashboard over the course of the day as we started doing, let me go ahead and scan networks. I mean, that's just not, running Metasploit and doing a scan of a network segment is just not something that a normal machine on a network is going to do, and that cut right off the bat popped up into the critical.
Am I allowed to ask more questions here about this?
Yeah, always.
Okay.
You just asked one, so go ahead.
Good dad humor there.
Yeah, right.
So of what I've seen so far, a lot of it I'm going to get from host telemetry. So if I'm running, Wazoo or an Elk stack or something like that, I'm going to see, hey, I've had 100 workstations that had an Nmap scan done on them, or their SMB was enumerated. What, I guess, like, for me, help me understand, like, what about this is better than doing it that approach?
Yeah, and I think the question you have to ask yourself is, if there was a single failed login against two things. One is, I'll say three things actually that'll hit on. So one is, do you have that host telemetry in your network? Because if you don't, you don't have any of this. So that's of course point number one. Point number two, depending on the malicious activity that's going on, would a single ping against remote desktop protocol,
ping and one ping only.
Yeah, one ping. Like, are you really going to see that? And is that going to pop up to the top on your host?
Okay, I can sort of buy that. Like,
yeah.
So for me, like, the area where this might make a lot of sense is in because I find host telemetry more detailed than network telemetry in a lot of ways. And I could, whether it's the same avenue, I could probably get to most of this information. Is in areas of our networks where we can't have host telemetry, like IoT, industrial IoT, OT environments where I don't get to install an agent on that Siemens controller, which, by the way, Schneider released a real doozy yesterday. If you haven't seen that, this would be a great thing for that, because you can get a lot of the same information without having to install anything on it.
Right.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Again, an interesting tool. Not everybody's going to be at the point in their security program where this is the kind of tool you need. And I think, even with our caveats that EDR isn't 100% effective for everybody, there's so much ransomware that seems to be, that's a space of, doing something on the endpoints is pretty key. But as you said, we have endpoints we can't touch. There's also this question of inventory. That was kind of my last point of even the things you could install the software on. It's been my experience that there are always ones that
things slip through the cracks.
That for whatever reason you don't have it on there, and
I like the both approach if it's affordable. And you were saying something about that to me, that something about Microsoft licensing and some blah 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 blah. Can you explain? You thought the pricing was pretty attractive.
Yeah, I mean, a plug that again, they're not paying me, but a plug I would put in for this company, for Vectra.AI. One of the things that they've added to their model is that they do is a good way to get people started if you're not ready for full network NDR. A lot of people, it seems like almost everybody I know is using Office 365 at this point. And a common challenge people run into is that there are these different levels of Office 365 licensing, the E1, E3, E5, and I think there's another E level coming down the road as well.
E-infinity.
But E-infinity. But a challenge that a lot of people have, I certainly had when I ran networks, is that, of course, it gets significantly more expensive as you go from E1 to E3 to E5. And in my experience, most people aren't able to afford E5 for everybody yet.
And NDR with SaaS is hard. So that's kind of cool that they can do that.
Yeah. And so they essentially have a method of plugging into the Office 365 logging features where you could at least consider instead of going from E3 to E5, that I could use this as the solution to accomplish the vast majority of the same things,
But for
and
less money.
for a fraction of the cost, essentially.
Cool.
So,
well, hey, thanks for sharing all that stuff.
Yeah,
with us. That was pretty fun.
Worth looking at, and
definitely a category of products we track pretty closely.
Yeah, absolutely. And any questions about this or other, reach out, and we're happy to share more. What did you say? What are we going to talk about next week?
We are going to talk about the sim space, and specifically with Google Chronicle. And I will explain to you how we actually use artificial intelligence in it.
Real bona fide
artificial
intelligence. Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we're going to talk about cognitive services in Sims.
Okay. Well, I'm going to hold my breath until that next session. Here we go. Are you ready?
Yep.